Today I'm going to be giving you a little bit of an overview of what we work with DARPA and other government agencies, including NIST and White House Communication Agency, for testing software applications for mobile devices. This is part of an effort that has started 2.5 years ago, and part of this effort has been going on for mobile software for a long time now. What spurred this effort is that we see a lot of push for companies and especially government agencies to move towards a more open mobile world where we will be using commercial off-the-shelf devices in a more restricted environment. As you see here, even companies, you can see from this graph, this is a 2012 graph from Gartner, you will find out that mobility is actually at the peak of what people want to see. On the other hand, if you take a look at the top 10 CIO business requirements, you find out that here we have number 3, or number 2 actually, is mobile technologies. Everybody wants to go into the mobile world and the mobile market, and everybody wants to take advantage of the new technologies. On the other hand, if in the same table, security ranks number 9, right? So we would like us to go to the mobile world, but as I will show you today, some of the problems that we face have to do with the fact that we have to depend on third parties to develop our code to enter this market, and sometimes this means that this poses some interesting risks for the people who actually adopt these technologies. See, in the case of traditional device concerns, when you have your laptop or your desktop, you really don't care that much. You care about eavesdropping, confidentiality. How do you think that this changes in a mobile environment? In a mobile environment, the number one risk and threat is the capture or loss of a device. So if you ask yourself, all of you, I'm sure you have either a phone or a tablet that you're working on right now, right? You have to ask yourself, what if you lose that device or someone steals that device? What is the most important thing that you have? You will find out that beyond the monetary loss of your device, the number one thing that you care about is your data. You don't really, I mean, yes, the cost of a device is important, but the moment that you lose a device, your mind goes, what about my contacts, my emails, my business documents? Who is going to open that device? What is he going to do with that device? Is he going to go online, or is he going to use my device to do something on behalf of my behalf? Of course, other attacks come in mind, a long list of them, but mostly have to do with the fact that we depend on an ecosystem for mobile devices. So for example, even if you see there's environments where bring your own device becomes now a more traditional approach, but the question becomes, you have not just one manufacturer, right? You have many manufacturers. In fact, you have many devices from the same manufacturer. You also have a lot of middleware. Google, good technologies, AirWatch, MDMs, all of them come into play, antivirus technologies. And at the same time, you have a layer of security that depends on what's existing on your device. How many of you know that currently we receive a lot of software for our internet service provider, right? I'm sure when you get your phone, either your internet service provider or your provider for telephony gives you a lot of applications. Who tested these applications to make sure that they don't exfiltrate information? Nobody, right? Who asks what are these applications really do? If they drain your battery, if they collect data from your phone. And the actual thing is that some of these technologies do indeed do that. And trust me when I say that antiviruses will never pick those up, because they don't look for what we call pre-classified threats. Pre-classified threats are threats that come with a vendor, an OEM developed form. So part of this effort, we tried basically to do what we call defense in depth. We looked at, as I will talk today, we looked at antiviruses, we looked at permissions, functionality of applications, resource restrictions, and power metering. We do believe that there are two things that you need to protect on your device: data and the fact that you need a device, which means that you don't want to have an application that will drain your device within a couple of hours. So when you have the application running, you won't be able to use the device for long. So reliability and security are two things that you care about. We looked at antiviruses, and what we found out is that commercial AV vendors are not ready for mobile. They drain the battery too quickly. They have unacceptable in a tactical setting. I would say unacceptable in an enterprise environment. Cannot be regulated at this point. They have worse detection rate than the desktop counterparts, and we all know very, very well what that rate is for desktops. They cannot guarantee detection. Why? Because they are not currently looking inside the application. So for instance, if you have a PDF that comes with your, as a document with your mobile app, they are not going to open up the application and check that PDF. The same thing that happens right now on desktops doesn't happen in mobile. And sometimes they call back home. So basically, in order to detect them, if an application is malware, they have to call back home to check if the signature matches and then come back to you. What if you don't have a network connectivity? What if the signature changes? So what we did, we obtained a set of, for the purpose of our study, we obtained a set of test malware from the wild and basically downloaded popular AVs from the Android market. And we created a cloud environment where AVs were allowed to test different malware in order for us to understand their behavior, how quickly do they actually react to a threat. And we found out that what we cared about is the overall efficiency. Okay, here's a set of malware, how many of them can you detect? But we also care about the latency, how quickly we're able to detect them from a day 0 of generation up to the time that basically we observe them. I'm putting up a table here that is part of our measurements. You can find out that some of the antiviruses did pretty well, but within 2 weeks of a release of an actual virus, they didn't do very well. So basically, what we call zero-day type of attacks were not mitigated at all. The funny part is that some of the mobile antiviruses out there, we don't even know if they're actually working well. You can take a look at the bottom. We were having an antivirus, we were never able to trigger it. It was not ever able to trigger it. So the funny part is that from a user's point of view, which one of these antivirus do you think that they prefer? Which ones? They prefer the ones that don't bug them much. They prefer the ones that they think that they work and they don't actually bug them. You know why? Because the best antivirus is the one that doesn't complain. You are laughing, but this is absolutely true. People don't like to have a pop-up in their screen. Also, you will find out that out of this list of antivirus vendors that we have up there, some of them, you don't even know their desktop counterpart, right? For example, Lookout, I am not sure that they have a desktop counterpart. And some of these users don't have what we call brand recognition, right? You wouldn't necessarily go directly to those. Another thing is, before I go to the next slide, another thing is that actually there is very little study to keep this. I mean, this list is already, like, I would say 4 months old. But you can imagine that there is nobody out there doing that type of analysis and say, hey, you know, here is a set of antiviruses. Let's see how they stack up with each other. And you know, the user is left on his own volition to identify what's good or bad. What we have done to be able to achieve that, we have done the following. We have created a portal where different tools can be tested. So for instance, you can have your own tool or any antivirus out there, and you can plug it in as part of this portal. And this portal actually is being maintained right now by NIST. And all these tools are being collected together, and you can actually check to find out how this tool performs in a realistic environment, right, with regular apps and against real threats. Also, as part of the analysis, what we do basically, we have a system that in parallel checks the antivirus. So for instance, if you give me an application, I farm it out to all the antivirus in parallel, and then I get a consensus, or I get to see what's going on, right? How many of them picked it up? Is it a false positive? Is it a true positive? As I said, the shortcomings of mobile antivirus currently is that they cannot detect zero-day malware. So if something comes up right now, you're on your own. I would even go one step further and say polymorphic or APT type of threats are not even in the radar because they're trying to appeal to the mass, right? They do not detect embedded malware, media or PDF, or threats that attack non-mobile devices. For instance, one common vector is you get a regular mobile app, you connect your mobile phone to your PC, you try to open a PDF, the PDF is malware. They do not support any behavior analysis. So for instance, if there is something that's behaviorally problematic with a malware, they don't pick it up. And yes, they cannot, some of them cannot correctly operate without network connection at all. What we did, we created a new set of tools. We believe that developers sometimes are well-intended, but they make mistakes. We believe that basically the applications that you have right now in the market, they are not of very, very good quality, all of them. And the reason for that is because the market is new. Big companies have not necessarily have a footprint. Small shops of third-party developers were able to climb up the scale, and that's OK. But they basically, all of them use a lot of third-party libraries and a lot of code that they don't know about. And what we created is the Android permission model. We found out that it's neither sound nor complete. It means that it has holes. There are many, many ways to bypass security analysis. One of them, for instance, a very simple one, is you download the application that looks benign. The application updates itself, and the update is the malicious component. And zero-day and polymorphic threats basically remain undetected. What we suggested, and actually happens right now, what we call functional, static, and dynamic analysis. If you ask yourself, every time that you download an app, what is that you need to know? What is that you need to know? You need to know what the app is really doing on your phone. Does it read your contacts? Does it try to write on your storage? Does it communicate over the network? What type of data does it send? What is that it's actually, why does it need a GPS location for your device? Why does he need access to your audio or camera? Why does it do that while not telling you about it? If you take a look at the end-user license agreements, most of the apps don't disclose that type of behavior there. And also another thing that happens is there are plenty of tools that do what we call static analysis, but there are very few tools that actually run the code to see what it does. Because what we find out, for example, that if you run the code for an hour and you pick up an update, automatically you know that you have to check the update too. Also, sometimes the code stays hidden, right? It requires an event for the code to actually be activated. What we do is we exercise all available data control flow paths to the application while keeping state. So basically what we do is we force the application to go through all the potential paths that it can take as an application. And not only that, we actually compute the coverage to find out, for instance, do you have a lot of libraries that you never use? And what happens on those libraries? And we also, I will talk to you a little bit about something that most of the people don't talk about, which is power analysis. You might have a completely benign app that is designed badly, and that just eats up your battery. And there are plenty of commercial apps that sit actually in your phone, and they eat battery without actually doing much. And what we care about is the reliability of the device in the end, right? We care about to find out what happens when we analyze the application and find out that it has more permissions. And I will show you some examples. What we care about, we care about to modify the Android engine to allow dynamic policies. For instance, I want to be able, while I'm in this room, for my phone not to receive calls, and at the same time to have access to specific data. When I leave this building, I don't want it to have access to data at all. I also want to make sure that while I'm at work, it connects to specific networks. When I go back home, some of the data that I have stored from my work are not accessible any longer because I want to play Angry Birds, and Angry Birds deletes my SD card data, and that's not good. Just to give you an example, right? This is a set of permissions that you see here. On the left side is what the application requested. On the right side is the required permissions based on the functionality that we detected by analyzing the app. There is a huge set of missing permissions. And on the other hand, there are a lot of not required permissions. This happens because a lot of the developers don't really understand the security model of a mobile device. They're very well intended, but what they do is eventually when they talk about security, they say, give me the maximum set of permissions so I don't have to worry about it. That creates a bigger threat because now this application becomes a liability. And sometimes this is a commercial application that you have. Just to give you an example, here is an application that is a malware that tries to connect out giving a telephony, and there is a hard-coded telephone there that you can see. So basically, you can see that the phone number attempt and the exact number and the SMS message that's been actually sent out is there. Right now, most of the malware that we see, they do not target the US market. And do you know why they do not target the US market? Because right now in US, we don't make payments through SMS. Asia makes payments through SMS. And Asia makes payments through SMS means that SMS become a target because when you go to supermarket, in order to pay in Asia, you send an SMS to the supermarket cashier and you get paid. Here in US, we don't have that. So malware who uses SMS for that communication exists, but it's just not in our radar yet. Guess what is going to happen when Square and the other companies start storing the credit card information on that Square and pushing them through? Guess what happens when Citibank will have scanning checks? Oops, we have that already, right? It's going to happen, right? The moment that there is a target, an economic or financial target, things are going to start going south. Because we believe that that's when the attackers or the people who are interested in this market are going to be lured in. I want to convince you today that power analysis is also important. We found out that sometimes, I will give you a very concrete example. Many of the phones that you have right now connect and download your GPS location every second from 3 different sources. Your telephone, your Wi-Fi, if it's connected, your cellular towers through triangulation, and also your regular satellites, right? Each one of them is super expensive in terms of power. You don't need it you are stationary right now. You don't move, right? Why would you need your location to be reminded to your phone every second? If there are better ways, by, for example, if you pair the fact that your phone has an accelerometer to find out that you're not moving, maybe you don't need to check your location every second. Maybe you can do it every minute. It's fine, because you haven't moved really. Or if you moved very slowly, you don't care about that either. So what we found out is that you can actually increase the battery life for regular commercial phones up to 7 times for your navigation by just adjusting the way that they communicate with the GPS. Also, we found out that in their effort to find Wi-Fi access points, many of your phones just deplete their battery because they try to connect to these Wi-Fi access points aimlessly, basically, and that effort drains power. Also, unfortunately, power exhaustion cannot be detected by just doing analysis of the code. You will never know that. You have to basically to run the application under specific environment conditions to do that. And we have a lab to do exactly that. Also, what we found out is some processes or some applications can evade power measurement. Why? You make the device do things on your behalf. So for example, you put the device in search mode of a Wi-Fi access point. Automatically, the device keeps trying to find the access point. If it doesn't find it, it still loses power in the process. And display. Display is the #1 power consumption right now on your phone. The bigger the display, the more the power consumption. The bigger the brightness, the more the power consumption. And guess what? The bigger the device is, the battery is not getting that much bigger. So the #1 problem that we will have for the next 10 years on those devices is going to be battery, because the technology of the battery has not been improved in many years. And the packaging and the size and the material stays the same, and that creates a big, big bottleneck. Also, what we found out is, strangely, the energy consumption that we have if we are in a routine is actually pretty much static on our routine. For example, we were able to identify that we knew when people were going to use their maps at specific intervals, or when they're going to go from home to a location, all of that, because we are creatures of habit, and that habit is basically imprinted on our power consumption to a point. So I'm giving you some sort of shots from an application that we created basically to keep track of the different variations in power and CPU consumption, so to give a user a bit better perspective. For example, if you're in a tactical environment, you are able to basically see what drains your battery and potentially shut it off. In conclusions, actually, this was done as a collaboration between, initially between GMU and DARPA, but DARPA funded a company, a startup company, to be able to take that technology to the next level. Basically be able to support agencies and also the DARPA itself. So we have created a company. Basically what we do is we have tested this application both on internal and on commercial apps. And we have also used a portal where people submit apps and we test them to find out if there is some sort of erroneous functionality. So for instance, if you see a chess game trying to connect to China and send all your contacts, you can count on infer that maybe that's a malware. We cannot know exactly what malware is, right? Nobody can define what malware is. But I can tell you that you can definitely define what you don't like. And we have a cloud AV-based system for AV scanning, functional analysis, dynamic code analysis, and power analysis. And that allows us basically to identify problems not only from single apps, but for apps as they go together in a phone. So imagine when you have an environment like a tactical or an enterprise environment, you don't care only about individual apps, but what the apps do when they put together in the device. Because that's your bundle there. And with that, I think I'm concluded, and I'm open to any questions. Yes?
Do you actually test the real devices you may have, or do you get it from emulator?
Thank you for, we have developed our own emulation for the dynamic and static analysis. For the power, it is device dependent, because what we found out is that basically specific device has completely different characteristics in terms of power. But for analysis, we have completely different cloud system that basically you don't have to have devices. And the same thing we can do for iOS.
By the way, do you emulate only Dalvik environment, or you go
we have also, we have, thank you very, very much. We actually count for everything. From JNI, we can count intents, JNI. We can actually find composite malware. What is a composite malware? The malware that comes in two pieces, two apps. One app that does A, one app that does B. And if you submit both of them, or you test them both, then the entire envelope of what the applications together do will be generated. That's why I said that in reality, you cannot just check single apps. You have to check the bundle. Yes?
Is there a fundamental difference between the risk for mobile devices to stationary devices?
The risk is actually, there is a bigger risk. I will explain to you why. Because unfortunately, the way that we operate with these mobile devices, in your laptop, you might have TrueCrypt, right, that encrypts the disk level. In your mobile device, you have many ways at which you cannot secure the data on your device. Right now, even if there are encryption solutions, none of them covers both the SD card and the internal NVRAM, for instance. None of them covers the memory of your device. So in other words, if I get your phone, forensically, I can recover a lot of data that I could potentially not recover if you have a secure laptop.
I think this is not a real problem of mobility. Luckily, the device itself is good.
Agreed.
Laptop that is mobile.
But the problem that we have right now is that on your desktop, the type of programs that you put right now are kind of coming from vendors that have been tested over a lot of years. If you ask how many of the apps that you run on your mobile phone right now come from vendors that you have no clue about, you will find out that it's going to be 90%. And that creates a lot of risk automatically, because this is a third party that you don't know if you should trust or not, right? And actually, that creates a nice ecosystem, because the small guy can actually create a very powerful and popular app, but on the same token, this small guy introduces risk that has to be mitigated, for example, by testing, to avoid being embarrassed in an environment, an enterprise or a tactical environment. Yes?
Are you going to be a software rating company anytime soon?
I'm sorry?
Are you going to be a software rating company anytime soon in terms of validation of functionality?
We already do. We already do that for different and commercial customers, I would say.
Is it going to be available for general public?
This is the problem that we have right now. If I give it out to the general public, we have the following problem, right? that the system is going to try to be gamed. When even we put it inside the agencies, the developers try to game the system. I agree with you that this is an internal discussion. I mean, it's something that I have to talk to the agencies that sponsor this program to decide what we're going to do. But I can tell you that we have it for very specific financial institutions and ISPs already been, I mean, there are contracts, but we are thinking, I mean, we could potentially make this an application. Like every time that you go to the market and you download an app, I can create a report for you. I can actually do it right now. But that's a little bit delicate because of the type of people that they use the program right now.
But if you use kind of an antivirus model as well, you know, get the data.
In our case, we don't expect to test the application on the spot. A cloud system tests the application on your behalf, and you have to wait for the result to come back to see it. If it's one of the popular apps, I might already have done that, right? But if it's something like one out of the 1,500 apps, I might not have already run it through the system. But it's a valid, I mean, we're thinking about it.
It's an interesting question, though.
It's a very interesting question.
Because it sounds like you guys do something nobody else is doing.
Yeah,
Or at least you do something different.
yes, yes.
Did you find in your analysis that there were any vendors that were less potential for risk, like BlackBerry or Android or
I would tell you that all of them have different type of risk. So for instance, I can tell you now that, for example, Android, due to the mere fact that applications are allowed to communicate, introduced a different risk model than Apple that doesn't allow that. On the other hand, Apple relies too much on the device, and sometimes that's a problem too. So there are different risk models. So let me give you an example. If I steal your iPhone and I can root it, automatically all your data, which you think are encrypted, they're not. That poses a different problem because the developer makes an assumption which is incorrect.